It's been a few weeks, and I've really been enjoying my time with Destiny 2. One of my favorite additions to the Destiny world are definitely the Lost Sectors. In case you aren't aware of what these are, well, they're basically dungeons that you can come across within the open world, to which you can go in, kill a mini-boss, and get some loot from a chest of his. So I was going through a Lost Sector the other day, and I got to thinking, I really enjoy these, but they all seem to suffer one thing: lack of variety. Now, this really applies to how they play out. They're all about the same. You enter a tunnel, find a few small rooms of enemies, kill a mini-boss, collect loot, return to surface, rinse and repeat. Now, I'm not saying get rid of these, as, sometimes it's nice to have shorter dungeons with rather simple goals. However, I do feel like there are ways to improve upon the variety of how dungeons function in Destiny 2. So with that said, this is my take of how Destiny dungeons can be made better. Now, I'm not a game developer, so I have not taken into account how well this sort of thing could be integrated into the current worlds we have, but I think this would definitely be a system Bungie could consider for Lost Sectors in the future, whether it's from new worlds within expansions or, hell, even Destiny 3, should they bring Lost Sectors back. So this is basically my one example of a particular instance of coming across a Lost Sector. So we set the stage as a fireteam of 3 on Io. Now, what's gonna happen is when you find a Lost Sector, there'll be a rally flag near the entrance. Now, if you want, you can decide to use said rally flag to basically wait for other players to come join you, or you can be presented with a roster of players in the immediate area to potentially come join you, or obviously if you're with a group of friends, then you can all go down into the dungeon immediately. So for starters, the dungeon will play out very similar to how they are now. We're gonna just expand upon this concept. So like I said, we start as a fiery team of 3, and as we enter the Lost Sector, we hear someone, talk over the radio telling us about, oh, you need to be careful because the last group of Guardians who dared enter that sector have not been heard from, blah blah blah, that sort of thing, setting the stage. So, like how they are now, you'll wander a small series of tunnels and caverns, killing enemies. For this example, since we're on Io, we're going to use the Taken. So eventually what's going to happen is you'll stumble upon a final group of Taken and their mini-boss, just like they are now. However, instead of killing the mini-boss, what's going to happen is, at about half health, he'll run ahead to an area where you're presented with 3 paths to go. A left, a right, a straight, and basically the boss is going to flee down the middle path. And here you are now presented with a few options. Now, being the curious guardians we are, we decide to explore the dungeon before finishing off our prey. So we decide to explore the left path and are presented with a small room with a chest on the other side, with a Taken captain next to it. Upon killing the captain, we loot said chest and are given a few items, say about, 5 IO tokens and maybe a piece of armor, and a new never-before-seen artifact called the Retina Fragment 1. And when we get this, a little text will appear that says, new optional quest, find the other Retina Fragments. Now when we travel back to the room where the captain fled, to the middle tunnel, we can now choose to follow him, or we can take the right path. But because we have this new strange optional quest, we're gonna take the right path so we can know what the heck this thing is, so yes, we progress from there. This time the tunnel goes from rock and kind of turns into a more, sort of a Vex room. Io is very dense with Vex technology. On the other side of this room is a glowing shard. Now between said shard and you seems to be nothing. Now, unless you look closely at the ground, you will not see this sort of strange blue beam of light. It's not going to be easily noticeable, but if you decide to look for it, then you can find it. Now, if you pass through said beam of light, you will take damage as a trap is set off, and the room basically crushes itself, aside from the chest, as we'll just say it's sitting on a shelf built into the Vex wall. Now, obviously, if you happen to see it, you probably are not wanting to touch it, so you'll jump over it, and then obviously nothing happens as no trap is set off, and you're free to loot the chest. When you do, you get more tokens and then another Retina Fragment, so a lot of this is pretty basic so far. So with everything in the area seemingly looted, we decide it's time to go finally kill our target, now that little mini-boss. And as you and your friends travel down the middle path, you'll probably come across a few Vex enemies battling the Taken as you traverse deeper into this dungeon, until you finally come across a huge cavern. Like, this thing is big. It's massive. There's like a bunch of lights and Vex constructs, like giant Vex buildings everywhere. And you're kind of standing on this cliff. Now, down below, you notice a huge Vex construct, and a bunch of Taken near it, including said mini-boss. Now, the only way to get down to the construct is basically a long jump down, similar to the huge jump down into the Vault of Glass. Now, it's here where the final showdown with you and the mini-boss will commence. Once they are killed, you will get the mini-boss's chest to loot from, and it will provide some gear based on your level, but mostly only rare gear will spawn from this, given it's only a mini-boss. Now, it will also provide you with another piece of the retina fragments. Upon collecting this, and since you took the time to explore and find other 2 fragments, you'll realize that you're standing on a Vex platform. Now, obviously, if you don't have... This is typically where the dungeon would end, and you'll find another path that leads, I don't know, back up the way you came, similar to how they are now. But if you took the time to explore and find the other 2 fragments, what's going to happen is the mini-boss that you killed, their chest is going to spawn on one of those Vex platforms, where you stand in it and those rings of light form. And what's going to happen is, as you guys are looting this, once you're done getting the loot, about that time, the lights around you have fully formed. And what's going to happen is your camera's going to shake, and the giant construct that was behind the mini-boss is going to start to move. And basically what's going to happen is, in a few moments, a Gate Lord is going to appear. Not like a pretty easy one. No, we're going to talk about like a very large one, similar to the one you come across during Cayde's first few missions on Nessus, along with a prompt on your screen saying "Joined Heroic Event." So the Gate Lord appears, and when you eventually kill it, no chest will spawn. Instead, the construct behind it that it formed out of is going to continue to move, and then it's going to open a huge Vex tunnel that leads down. Now here's where this simple dungeon is going to become a bit more complex. As you traverse the tunnel, you will stumble upon various puzzles and traps, along with ruthless enemies who can pack a hefty punch. Maybe bring those bright beams from Nessus, the Nessus strike, except add more in dense areas. And basically, the thing is, these dungeons should feel similar to a dungeon in D&D, in my personal opinion, full of traps, enemies, hidden rooms that could contain, loot, or various enemies and punishments. They should feel like they want to keep outsiders out and protect what is at its heart. Hell, you can even add trapped chests like from Rise of Iron. Friggin' hated those things. So the tunnel will eventually come to an end, and now the surroundings will be kind of a perfect blend of Vex and planet insides. But you'll finally enter a final large room with 3 of those little platform things that opened up the construct door that led into the tunnel. And when you enter the room, you will once again see the shaking of your camera. You'll notice that the entrance to the room you entered is now blocked off by rubble. Then the fragments you collected along the way are going to appear in front of you all, and they're going to kind of float away ahead of you guys, and then combine into a light. And then that is when it spawns the final boss. A Vex never before seen. There'll have to be a new model for this, but it's just a little bit bigger than a Gate Lord, and it is pissed off that you managed to get this far into the dungeon. Now this boss we'll call the Retina of Glass. The eye is made up of the fragments you collected, and this, like I said, will be the final boss of this dungeon. Now there will be multiple ways to take the boss on. You can run around and empty loads and loads of ammo into him until he dies, or you can find other ways to help you kill him faster. Maybe use different advantage points of the terrain if they made any. But for this example, we're going to use, again, those platforms where you stand in the middle. So for this example, there are going to be 3 platforms in the room, and if each player stands in one of these 3 platforms, the boss's health will decrease significantly faster. Now, if the boss's health is brought down to half of what it started with by players standing in these platforms, a new prompt will appear, and it says, Legendary Event Joined. So now, things are about to get even harder, but the reward that much sweeter. So, since you've quickly depleted so much of this once great Vex's health in a matter of minutes, you're basically giving it a challenge for the first time. So now you can either stay on the platforms to attempt to kill it quickly, but the amount of Vex pushing to kill you is greater, along with the boss's aggression increasing. However, when you do finally kill it, you are gonna basically be drowned in loot, given it's a legendary event. The boss will drop a chest that grants, I don't know, let's say 15 IO tokens, a bunch of legendary gear, and a piece of gear specific to this boss, so players will have reasons to come back to this dungeon to possibly get a different piece of this boss's gear. And since it was a legendary event, your chances of getting an exotic is significantly increased, so you'll also get an exotic engram. So all is good and done, right? Well, wrong. See, we've only completed the dungeon at this point. Now we need to get out. So what's going to happen now is the cave that you're in is going to start caving in on itself. I don't know, maybe it's like a Vex failsafe. It's going to bring down this dungeon. In doing so, you will notice an out-of-the-way tunnel to the side be marked. Your goal is going to be escaping before a timer runs out. Now, it won't be too difficult as mistakes do happen. You'll have to run past some other easiest traps along the way, but they won't hinder you too bad. And if you die a time or two, you will be able to still have a chance to make it out of the dungeon. Now, when you exit the dungeon, you're basically going to be on a completely different part of the map, making the world feel even more interconnected with itself. And when you get out of the tunnel, the exit will collapse on itself and won't be revealed again until you start the dungeon over again whenever it reloads. If you fail to escape the dungeon, then there will be heavy consequences. Remember, you're escaping during a legendary event. This is not going to bode well if you do fail. If you fail, then you will lose all of the encrypted, legendary, and your exotic engrams you collected in the dungeon. All of the gear that you find will stay with you, however, but this is a legendary event, and if you don't complete it, there will be punishment. But this is just one idea on how Lost Sectors in Destiny 2 can be improved. Obviously, there are so many other possible ways Bungie could flesh out the dungeons in Destiny 2. I would love to see what they come up with, aside from just go in here, kill a few enemies, kill a boss, collect the loot. I would love to definitely see more traps, more puzzles. They should feel kind of similar to mini raids, just not quite as complex. And the gear should feel sweeter the more you progress into it. But what do you think about this example? Do you like it? Do you hate it? What else do you think could be improved upon further in Destiny 2? Let's have some discussions down in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.